Well, hello, everybody. Again, this is another episode of the From There to Here podcast. I'm your host, Lawrence Temple, and today I have uh, my sister with me. We share a birthday. This is Stella Ott. I don't like to do a lot of introductions because I want my guests to do most of the introducing, but she is a teacher at Mainland High School and a whole lot more. And purposely, I want her to say more about what she does. So, Ms. Ott, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful, and I'm glad to talk with you. I know we used to work together once upon a time, so I'm glad
Yes.
we have this reuniting right here in front of the internet. So, I told you my one question in advance is what would be your elevator speech if you had to boil down who you are in a few seconds on an elevator, what would that be?
I would say I am caring, compassionate, loving, open to new things, learning, but also want to share with everybody what I have and what I know.
Well, I can vouch that that's the case from our time working together. Now, I told the audience that you teach at Mainland High School. What do you teach? Because it's kind of the crux of what we might talk about today.
I teach criminal justice and 911.
How did you come to what you're doing now?
Oh, Lord. If you would have told me 10 years ago I would be sitting here doing
Mhm.
this, teaching in a classroom, I would have said absolutely not.
Right.
Because going from, well, my past, how we met was a law enforcement officer, a school resource officer, a very little time ago. And I had been asked quite often to come into the classroom from previous principals here where I worked as the school resource officer here as well. But I left that and went into investigations in DeBerry. I was there for 10 years with the sheriff's office
Okay.
doing investigations. I loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it, loved investigations. I was offered a position at a private company because I had done such a great job tracking $1.5 million worth of assets of theirs. I located it, yeah, and was able to track back the people who had stolen it from Miami all the way up to Maine. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I never knew this type of job existed. And they
Okay.
said, okay, would you be interested in this? I'm like, sure, I would. And um, they said, well, we'll let you know if we ever have any openings. Well, lo and behold, 3 weeks later, they have an opening and they're offering me that flash money, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. So I took the dive and I retired from the sheriff's office and I went into the private sector. Well, not having been in the private sector since I was 22 years old, that's an entire lifetime. And things are quite differently done,
Okay.
and expectations of morals are much lower than the standards I'm accustomed to in my
Okay.
profession. And they wanted me to go out and do things, party night with the guys. I'm not doing that. So that was a very short, abrupt 17 days I lasted working for them because, and they said, well, we don't think you're quite a team player because you're not going out to the nighttime activities. I said, no, no, no. I'm not being paid to be here for the nighttime activities. That's not part of my job. Well, we don't think you're quite a good fit for the team, and we're going to have to reconsider if you don't go to this X event over here, it was not happening, period. So I quite politely went back upstairs and made a phone call to my husband and said, this is what they want to do. And he said, no. I said, okay. He says, I don't care if I have to eat ramen. This is what we're going to do. You're not doing that.
Okay.
So went back downstairs. I was at a conference, mind you, with them. And I said, look, this is not for me. He goes, well, you could go back to your old job. I said, do you understand I retired and I cannot go back to where I left? It takes people years to get into those positions.
Okay.
So you just can't unretire. It doesn't work like that. So um, anyway, I kind of finagled my way for a little bit, a couple of months, and ran into an old an ex-assistant principal from here. She's still an assistant principal somewhere else. And her family was having their end of year school celebration. You know, dad and mom
Mm-hmm.
always threw the thing for her. She's an adult, but mom and dad's house was always, you know, a bigger place for everyone to converge at. And she said, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Well, you know, I'm kind of in between jobs right now." And I explained it to her. She goes, "Oh my God, do you have a resume?" I'm like, "Yes." "Do you have a degree?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I do, because let me go backwards. 2015, I wanted to get promoted to sergeant and I missed it by 0.25 points because everyone else had a degree or military service that they were allowed X amount of points for. And I did
Okay.
not, because I went into law enforcement very young. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm not going to ever have this excuse again. I'm going to get this done. So I did.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, well, here I am, 40, how many years old and going, I don't want to end up just, you know, mediocre. I mean, I had a wonderful law enforcement career. Don't get me wrong. I loved it. I truly, truly loved it. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a point in time where it just becomes time. And it had been time when I was offered this other position. And so I said, why? What's going on? Just give me your resume. We actually have a criminal justice program at Mainland. I said, excuse me? She said, we're looking for a teacher. I'm like, what? How is this even happening? You know, I wasn't even going to go to the barbecue. But I'm like, yeah, my husband convinced me because the dad was a coworker of his, and it's all right, let's just go. Anyway, so long story short, I had to wait because I had retired. So I had to wait 7 or 8 more months until I could be a full time teacher. But I came in April of 2018. So I was just flabbergasted to know that this was a thing. I knew there was one at University High School, but I didn't know Mainland had one. And
Okay.
being living on the east side of the county was much easier for me to come here than, you know, go anywhere else. Um, but then I learned I knew Atlantic had one, I knew University had one, and now New Smyrna, and then Mainland was the last one to add theirs. So coming into the program, it had been very stale because they didn't have anyone for a year and a half. And so, you know, fill-ins, teachers, coaches, whomever can warm the seat for that day, just so there was somebody there with them. And the kids were, it was quite refreshing when my first day with them, they looked at me because you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yep.
So I was business suit, obviously the school royal blue color with black, stood there, everything made up and done. Good morning, good morning. And they're looking at me like I have 10 heads when they're walking in the door.
Uh-huh.
And I said, hi, my name is Mrs. Ott. This is who I am. This is where I come from. And then I proceeded to go around the room and ask each one of them their names. And they're looking at me like, nobody's ever paid us attention in this class before. What is she all about? They were curious. I said, well, we have 22 days together. I don't know what we can accomplish because I went into this role. I had 4 torn textbooks. That was it. There was nothing else in this classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could show you my classroom right now, it's amazing. Not even gonna lie. I have teachers, I have custodians poke their heads in here. And go, oh, I want to take this class. You know, it's just, I guess it's my energy that makes me curious to them because they're like,
Mm-hmm.
and my first speech to every new student I meet is, I am not your normal teacher. First off, let's get that straight. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, this is my classroom. We will do as I want to do. But if you know of a different way to do it better, by all means, let's do it. Let's try it. And I'm always open to allow them to have input as if there's a current event happening and they ask me about if I have A, B, and C planned for the day, and then this happens over here. Miss Ott, can we talk about this today? Of course we can. I can take anything and wrap it into the criminal justice realm, period.
Okay. That makes sense.
So the kids were amazing. the next thing I know, they're coming back the next day and they're telling me this and talking about this happened and what happens
Hmm.
if you do this, and hypothetically speaking. And I'm like, oh boy. So the questions started coming, but it was great. I mean, they were telling on themselves also, but I,
When I gotta say, when I was teaching middle school, we had I think it's like a assistant state attorney or something. She came to talk about um crimes and just things teenagers should know about the law, things they tend to get
right.
in trouble about, they need to know. And the same thing, she was very engaging, wonderful person. And the kids were basically confessing to all kind of stuff. They were saying them like they were hypothetical, but basically they were just confessing their sins. And
Yes.
she had to say, "Hey, listen, I'm a law enforcement person. I could
Just
arrest you.
stop
Just
talking.
please
Yes.
stop confessing."
Yes.
So I saw that. Wait, I have a question. Because you're in the school world and I am too. But the average person out there is not in the school world. Their
Right.
kids, they maybe have no kids or their kids are grown. So they don't deal with teenagers daily like you do. What can you tell us about, I'm gonna say this right. Tell what makes you so excited about the young people that you deal with. Or in other words, tell us about the young people you deal with from a perspective that an outside person wouldn't have because they're not around kids.
They have they have so much energy. They want to learn. They want to know what you know. They want to be able to show you that, hey, I got it. I got it and you gave it to me. And I shouldn't say concerned, but CTE, career technical education, is what my criminal justice program is under. And I have had students over the last, this is my coming up on the end of my 6th year teaching already here. That it's gone that fast. And when I have them, I had one of them like, hey, Miss Odd, I just want to let you know. She stopped by, left a nice note at the front desk back in March. I'm starting the academy in May. You inspired me, blah, blah, blah. Never even told me that's what she wanted to do. And this is 4 years ago. She was my student. She left and went to FPC. So, um, and then I had another young man that I knew he wanted to become a deputy sheriff. So she was my first female deputy sheriff in Flagler County. This was just October of last year.
Okay.
Um, October 11th, and then October 12th, I had my first male deputy at Volusia County Sheriff's Office. Then I had another student who used to come in. We have a split lunch schedule. So he would come in to sit during his lunch with his friends who were in my class at the time. And
Mhm.
he wouldn't disturb anything. He would just sit there. And I said, why don't you just take the class? He goes, I can do that. I'm like, yes. Well, lo and behold, guess who's graduating from the police academy next month?
Okay.
And that, it just, it's exciting to be here with them. It's exciting when that you see their eyes light up with that interest and you're like, whoa, I never knew I could do that. But just to get these messages from these kids and kids, I mean, they're 19, 20 years old now, but to say, thank you. The quote was, I have mad respect for you for doing this, because they don't quite
Okay.
understand the physicality of it and the mentality of it, going through that academy to get to that point where you can
Okay.
wear that badge.
Got it.
But the students, they're starving. They're starving for love and attention and acceptance for what they want to be. The world has become a crazy, crazy place. And I thought, with what happened a few years back, that there was such a dark shadow on law enforcement, that how am I going to get these kids to want to do this job,
Yes.
and and not brainwash them? But I also tell them the first day I meet them, I'm not Willy Wonka. I don't sugarcoat it. I'm just going to tell you the way it is. Sometimes you may not agree with what the thought process is behind it, but this is the way it is. But kids are amazing. They're amazing. I feel like I have 1,200, 1,500 kids now of
Yeah.
my own,
You,
but
yep, you're the real thing. You got that teacher bug thing. I know what you call it, but you got it, obviously.
it's
Couple questions. When you dealing with the kids, especially when you started a few years ago, what are some of the main misconceptions or misunderstandings that you find kids have when as relates to law enforcement and the world that you come from? What are some of the main things that they have a misconception about that you address?
Well, in the beginning, not so much now because I think they know me, and I'm very open with my students because there's no other way to be. You have to be completely transparent with them because they're going to know if you are up there telling them a story that is
Okay.
not so, and they will call you on it, and you better be ready for it. But like I said, the kids misconceptions that we're all the same, and I was like, let's back up here just a minute.
Okay.
So you're telling me that everybody who wears a badge, I said, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of offense to that because everybody who wears a badge is not the same.
That's
So,
good.
okay. So, and then I'll give an example like, okay, so what about that coach that was arrested for, I don't know, inappropriate things
Okay.
or stealing something from the school? Does that make them all bad coaches? Well, no, Miss Ott. Why would you say that? Bingo. I said, so do you think I'm a bad person? Bad police officer? No. Okay, so how can you lump everybody in the same bag of donuts, if you will?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it gets them to start thinking and looking as people as individuals, not at the uniform. Because let's face it, they all have their favorite teachers.
Yeah.
And, it seems like a lot of them come to me more so with problems. And I shouldn't say problems, just normal teenage things that they go through. And it's like, oh, I don't want to know this, but you're going to tell me anyway.
Yeah.
But and then I listen, and well, if it were me, this is what I might think about doing, or this is really isn't a good idea the way you're going down this road. So you need to stop and take your emotions out of it for a minute and think logically.
Okay.
Um, but the misconception was that all police officers are the same, and they have learned that they definitely aren't.
Okay.
We would never think that about you. So how can you make that a true statement then? How is it just a blanket statement?
Yeah.
And I make them think.
That's it. Making them think. Um, but speaking of thinking, let's go back. Let's go to the Stella story for a minute. When you were say the same age as these kids, maybe you're a 10th grader. First of all,
Mhm.
where did you grow up? What city, what town, where?
I grew up in New Smyrna Beach,
Okay, I didn't know
Florida.
that. Okay. So when you're, I don't know, ninth, 10th grade, what did you imagine you would be doing with your life? What were you thinking in those days?
Well, there's an odd caveat to that question. I graduated high school when I was 15. I finished ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in about 5 months and graduated with 4.0. So I didn't know there was anything else to do besides, grow up, get married, have kids, go on with the American dream.
Hmm.
Um, I never, I really, I had always liked detective shows, the female detective shows, Charlie's Angels and Policewoman and all those cool women like that.
Yeah.
But, but no one ever got that interest sparked for me. Even though I wanted it, I wanted to do it. And it was a friend of mine that I met, hers, well, their brother and sister, their father was a motorcycle officer. And I remember him coming home one day when I was over their house, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. A motorcycle cop, with all the bling on the uniform and everything. And I was probably, I don't know, 12, 13 maybe. I was like, wow, this stuff is really real. Because I grew up in a very rural area. Well, not grew up. I'm from Ohio originally, so I was in farm country.
Okay.
Police officers we just didn't see them, It wasn't like they are here. So anyway, I'm like, never thought that I would get to that point, and then somebody says he would never be a great officer. Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
okay. I'm going to prove you wrong
Yeah, there
because
you
it was
go.
my idea. It was my idea because actually was selling newspaper articles for the Florida. Police Chiefs Association, and I had to go into each one of the agencies. This is back in 1991, a while ago.
Okay.
And I met with Chief Ford of Port Orange Police Department, and I had two kids by that time. They were very young. And I asked him for the letter so I could solicit businesses in the town to get the advertisement to pay for the magazine. He sat back and he said, "Have you ever thought about being a police officer?" I said, "Well, yes." He goes, "Well, why haven't you?" He said, "Because anybody who can do cold calling to businesses in a place they don't know anybody or anything about the town, you would be amazing." And I said, "Well, quite frankly, I don't have the money to go to college to do the class." He goes, "What if I paid for it and sponsored you?" Are you talking to me, sir? And he says, "I can't pay you an hourly rate while you're there, but I can pay for the schooling." That was $2,000 back in 1991. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, it still is a lot of money, but I said, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No, I can bring you on. You can work up until 6 months prior to being, you know, sworn in at the agency. You can come in and work on the weekends and nights while you're going to the academy." I said, "So you just met me." He goes, "I'm a pretty good judge of character."
Okay.
And long story short, 2 weeks later, I was working at the police department, done. And that was April 26th of 1991. I'll never forget it.
Now, it's all right. So if that's 91, I'm
Yeah,
sure there weren't as many female officers in departments as now, I'm assuming.
absolutely not. No, we had
So
four in the whole
did
entire
you
agency.
did you have a lot of people in and out of the profession or both telling you you're crazy, don't do that, that's not for women, that kind of thing? Did you get much of that?
Um,
And how have you dealt
my
with that along the way?
my parents didn't want me to do it.
What did they
I said,
say?
"That's a dangerous job." I said, "Well, you know what? It's dangerous working at McDonald's or Taco Bell also because they get robbed at night. I'd rather go to work with a gun on my hip and be trained to handle a situation than not."
Okay.
My dad was okay. My mom was like, eh. But they were two different households at that point, so
Yeah, yeah.
it was fine. As far as coworkers that were males, we had one female per shift, so it was one on every 12 hours, and then the rotating shifts. But the macho guys, I will never forget this. Never forget this. My life, I'll never forget it. Um, there was a rolling gate at Silver Sands Middle School. It had come off the roller. I don't know if a car had hit it or what had happened, but about 2 o'clock in the morning, he's doing the business checks and he gets on the radio and asks for a backup unit to help him at the school. I'm the only unit in service, so guess what? Here I go. I'd been working on the shift 2 or 3 months on my own. And he gets on the radio and says, "Can you send someone else?" And I took that as, okay, because I'm a female. You don't want me to come and help you?
Hmm.
All right. She's the only one we have in service. Okay. And you could hear like the disappointment. So I get there and I said, "Excuse me, what part of this job do you not think I cannot do? You and I had to do the same thing. We don't get treated differently in the academy just because we're females. I had to do the same weight you did. I had to do the same run you did. I had to do the same swim you did. I had to shoot the same. I had to do everything the same you did. There was no accommodations because I'm a girl." Okay. He goes, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that." I said, "Well, that's how it came off." And
Yep.
everybody in the world listening to the radio this night heard that. So how are we going to fix that? He goes, "Well, it's just the heavy gate, the heavy gate." I said, "So you don't think I can lift like you can?" I said, "Let's go." So put the gate back on, no problem. And he was very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Um,
Apologetic,
okay.
humbled, because later on that night, we went to a domestic fight call where the male was just obnoxiously intoxicated and didn't want to have anything to do with that male officer. He goes, "Maybe you could talk some sense into him. Come on over here for a minute. Tell me what's going on." And he was able to go talk to the female. We were able to get everything resolved, do the investigation. Obviously the man got arrested for beating on his wife, but It wasn't that screaming and yelling like he was doing and
Okay.
challenging the male officer. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's just back up a little bit.
Got that.
So um, from that point forward, it was more of a, can you come over here and talk to this person for me? So I have a way of speaking with people
Yeah,
that
I've seen that.
um, that a lot of the male officers, it's more of a, I don't want to say macho, but it's more of a challenge, I think, to them when a male challenges them verbally.
Yeah.
And it may not mean I want to fight you. It's just, it's like that puffy bird chest, I guess.
I I get it. What? Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Uh, I love this. Okay, okay, let's take another step. Okay, so you didn't plan to do the teaching thing. You kind of talked a little bit about how you got in here. You talked about this some, but let's diagram it some more. When you see how your students respond to you, which is different than they respond to some of the others, um, looking at yourself from a distance, what things do you think it is you do that kids are responding to?
They know I genuinely care about them. One thing that I require of all of my students, I don't care in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, you better be carrying your subjects. Every one, you have an A in my class, you better have an A in your English. You better have an A in your math because you are supposed to be responsible at this point in your life. Because I tell them, I said, listen, you are on the verge of adulthood. So until you do something to take away that adult card I'm giving you,
Hmm,
you're an adult.
I like
Don't
that.
ask me to go to the bathroom. You know how. You know where the pass is at. Go. You abuse it, that's going to be lost. So I think being that way from upfront and knowing that when those progress reports come out, I'm going to go, what is this? Why do you have a D in English? Oh, no, 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 no. You go get your work. You come right here and do it right now. The rest of us are going to do this. You can catch up on this tomorrow because
Mm.
that is more important right now. This is an added benefit. You don't get this benefit until you do the mundane.
Do you think, because a lot of the best teachers I've ever worked with came to teaching from another career, they did something else first. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think there are things about your non-teaching past that helped you when you came to the teaching world?
Yes, I do.
What would you say
I,
that is?
I don't take no for an answer. They will do their work in my class, they will do their work in the other classes. I will hold you accountable. You will do it. This is your job. But I don't get paid. You get paid in the form of a diploma. And if you do not have a diploma, you're not going to get paid very well. Let's break it down a little bit to that, 10 or $12 an hour job you're making. And
Okay.
I break it down. I do, okay, you work how many hours a week at $15 an hour? 20 hours a week. Great. So let's do this. Let's do the math here for a moment. And I break it down daily, hourly, weekly,
Mm.
monthly. Okay, are you going to be able to live off of this? Is this your career or is it a job? There's a difference, my friend, a big difference. Well, what do you mean? When you find a career, it's something you love. You do something you love, you never work a day in your life.
That's true. Yeah.
I was to the point in my career I was dreading when the alarm would go off in the middle and at 5 in the morning, or I'd get called out in the middle of the night because it was just, quite frankly, it was taxing after 10 years. And my husband, having done the same job, his phone had gone off the prior 10 years to my phone going off. So it
Uh,
was a non normal sleep environment. And I was, like I said, I was ready for a change. And this came along and it was just, I couldn't understand, quite frankly, why I'd been put in that position with that private company
mm-hmm.
that, but I held my morals and my standards as I always have. And it turned into be one of the biggest blessings in my life I've ever seen. Giving back from here and my heart to these kids, I
Mm-hmm.
have so much here that they're never going to get out of a book. I find it easier for me to teach what I know without using a pacing guide or a book, although I know I cover them, it may not be in the traditional order, because I can take one investigation, say a bank robbery, a home invasion slash bank robbery, and I can tie into English writing, I can tie into evidence, I can tie in forensics, I can tie in witness interview, I can tie
Mm.
in suspect interrogations, I can tie in photographing, crime scene, fingerprinting, all into just that one thing, where it might take someone else 3 months to do that. Where I can go bing, bang, boom, done. And they're like, whoa, that was cool. And then when I pull out my case file and say, see, what did you guys just do? Look at this. Whoa, this is really cool, Miss Hot. And I guess I'm teaching from the heart. I
And
guess that's what it is.
that leads me to, I guess, my last question. I guess. Um, in real, I got two questions I'll squeeze into this time. One, could you tell me what are the characteristics, build the perfect law enforcement officer? What does that tell me? What would be the elements of the perfect law enforcement officer, if you can? That's question one.
The perfect law enforcement officer. Um, Compassion. You can learn everything else. You can learn, you can memorize, you can do these things. You
Okay.
can't think you're going to go out there and be super cop and fix it all in one day. If you can change the world by one person, you don't know what that domino effect is going to have from that one person to the
Okay.
next. And having um, good morals, integrity, courage, honor, all of those things lumped into that compassion and caring for people, you're going to have a great police officer.
Okay. And my last question is kind of connected to that. Um, in your line of work, your students are different than you. They have different home life. Some are a different race, some are different sex, whatever. Just what are your words about bridging gaps, period, whether it's at school or not, bridging the gaps between people, as in we have different backgrounds. How do you connect with people who are quote unquote different than you?
I love that. I love that you asked me that question. Being different. When I don't like people saying, well, you're X race and you're Y race. And I said, hold on just a moment. What color do you bleed? Red. Well, what color do I bleed? Red. Did you choose the color of your skin? Well, no, my parent. Okay. Did I choose the color of mine? No. So what makes you and I so different? When you get down to it, we are two human beings, and that's all we are.
Mm-hmm.
We both may have come up from different backgrounds. You don't know how I was raised. You automatically assume, because I present myself very well and I'm confident, that I was brought up in a middle to upper class home. And then I tell them a story about a girl who was brought into a family that was very poor on a farm, and da 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 da. And this, she wanted to be this one day, but there was no money for this and no money for that, and wearing hand-me-down clothes, hand-me-down shoes. But she happened to be the biggest girl in the family, so how does that work? The parents couldn't afford new clothes for her because she was
Mm.
third in line. So when they say, wow, well, that's kind of sad, I said, well, that's fantastic, because she's sitting in front of you right now. And I think it lets them know that just because someone looks together and presents themselves well, don't judge them by the cover of their book. Until you read the entire story,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know the ending. You don't know the middle, and you don't know the beginning. So you have to want to know that person. So when I
Mm.
ask my students, how was your weekend? How was your break? How was this? How was that? Those little things to them are bridging those gaps that I don't think I could hand them $1 million and they would be as happy to know that someone is actually concerned about them. And I think that's the difference.